Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling full-time trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials across the world. I've met many people during my career and have spent many hours on stage and off with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on the weekends with friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you. Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger for Trad Jazz Today, and my next guest is going to be someone who I've known for way too long, one of the funniest men I've ever known, an incredible percussionist, great piano player, and I think he can tap dance if you even ask him to. But here it is, Mr. Ray Templin. Ray, how are you?
Well, hello, Dan. It's good to see you, and hello, everybody out there in cyberspace. And tap dancing, I'm not too good at unless I'm having an IRS audit.
Oh, I wish I was better at tap dancing. Anyway, so John Brand, who I just interviewed, told me I needed to ask you this question first off.
Yes.
Do you remember Friday Harbor 3D photograph?
Friday Harbor 3D photograph. I've been into 3D photography for many years, and I know that I probably had the camera with me up there, but I don't know specifically what he would be talking about.
I don't either. He told me to ask you. So you must have taken some interesting 3D photos.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. Every once in a while there's a gem there, but you just keep blitzing away and hope for the best. I have no idea what he would.
I was relating the story to him about at Pismo Beach Festival. Right before I went on stage, you told me one of the filthiest jokes I'd ever heard in my life, and I couldn't stop laughing when I was supposed to be playing. And I said, I'm pretty sure he did that on purpose. And then he laughed. He said, okay, then you need to ask him about Friday Harbor Festival 3D photographs.
I'm stumped, but I'm getting old now and I'm forgetting a lot of things too.
Well, I remember the days when I used to forget stuff.
Do you now?
I do. So, Mr. Templin, where were you born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois.
My word.
Yeah.
No, that's east side, west side.
Actually, kind of northwest. Yeah, and I grew up there for about 5-6 years, and then we moved to the far northwest suburbs. But yeah, Chicago. And so when I started getting out and about and listening to live music and stuff, there was a lot of stuff going on there.
Now, how old were you when you started listening to music?
I tell you what, I was listening like right away. My dad wasn't a player. My parents weren't players, but he had records playing in the house all the time. He loved people like Teddy Wilson and Earl Hines and the Chicago people, Muggsy Spanier, and a lot of those kind of people. And that's where his ear was, and that stuff was going all the time in the house. And so that's what I was hearing, from a very early age. There was always music going. And I had his younger brother played kind of like, he was a good piano player, but kind of party, we'd have these singing parties and stuff like that. And
sure.
So there was a lot of music happening there.
Yeah, we were, in fact, I forgot who it was. I was talking to you about the days when your parents would throw gigantic parties and you would listen to record albums and cocktail parties, they were called, at the houses. And it just involved sitting around listening to, comedians on the stereo or music happening.
Comedy albums, yeah.
Oh, yeah. My parents had a bunch of them. And because of it, I have a lot of old jokes rattling around in my head,
Yeah.
Bob Melvin. Do you remember a guy named Bob Melvin?
No, can't say as I do.
Yeah, he was another one of those comedians of that era. He had a really big album called Closer Baby, Don't Fight It, where he talked about blowing in girls' ears until he blew their eardrums out. Anyway.
Wow.
It was a funny album, at least for an 8-year-old. It was a funny album.
Yeah. Well, you know, I came up with all of the comedians. All those people put out albums. Jack Parr and Bob Newhart and the TV people, and then there was, you know, the Sid Caesar and Carl Reiner and Mel
Even Lenny
Brooks.
Bruce had albums.
Lenny Bruce had albums. I wasn't necessarily privy to a lot of that stuff, but later on, I came to kind of appreciate what he was trying to do. You know, yeah.
Well, it's pretty evident that as well as listening to good music, you listen to good comedians too.
Well, those early days, you know, you could see the early television people, you know,
Shows and those things.
Milton Berle and Sid Caesar and all of those guys. You know, that was I was born in 47, so 1947, and
Okay.
not 1847. But yeah, so all of that was just starting to you know, blossom on television and stuff, and there was a lot of wonderful stuff locally in Chicago that you know, kind of caught my eye, and I liked a lot of that.
Of course,
stuff.
plus you had the road pictures with you know, with
Hope and Crosby, yeah, wonderful stuff.
and of course the Costellos.
Yeah.
Costello.
Absolutely, yeah. That was all pretty. All of that was coming back again. They had been on radio and in vaudeville, but now that was coming back on television again. So,
Well, it's evident because you have kind of a similar sensitivity comedy-wise as I do, and you know, I don't know if you know this, but I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, so that Midwestern kind of ethic, and it's a real thing, as you know.
oh yeah.
It's kind of pervasive with those of us who were in that era and that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you started out on piano then? You didn't start out on, or did you start on percussion?
I started, you know, we had a piano. Nobody really played it except when we had parties and people would come over. But there was a piano there, but I'm listening to all this stuff, so I would tinker with it. I was always curious, how did these guys doing that? You know, because there was such big sound they were getting out of these pianos that I'm hearing on these records, and I was always fascinated with that. But I would play along with a lot of the records in those days. And I actually have one up on the shelf here. I found it in an antique store out here. But my parents would have these parties, and you could buy potato chips. And the brand was New Era, and it came in a 1 pound of chips in a big tin can. And when that can was empty, that was my first drum outfit. You know? And I'd be playing on that big can, and it's I don't know, about 15 inches tall. I'm looking at it. I got it sitting up there in a bookcase.
I'm sure you went to the pots and pans in the kitchen.
Pots and pans in the kitchen. And finally, when I was about 5, they actually bought me a very old secondhand drum kit that I wish I had today, which had the 26-inch bass drum and the Chinese tack tom-tom with goat skin on it. And yeah, oh man. That was something. So then I actually had a real drum set there.
No, believe it or not, as well as I know you guys, and I you know, we're not real. I haven't spent as much time as I have with a few of these people that I've been interviewing, but I research everybody nonetheless and learn things. And I read your story about your first piano lesson.
Oh yeah.
Can you relate that to the folks?
Yeah. I had been tinkering around, like I'm saying. And when I was in the 2nd grade, I went to parochial school, and my mother had heard that this nun was giving piano lessons after school, and so she signed up and took me down there. And she thought, well, if he's really that interested, you know, he ought to take some lessons. And I came in there, and they spoke a little bit, and then the sister, whatever her name was, said, well, sit down here. Yeah, your mother says you play a little. Play me something. We want to see where we're at. And I played the 12th Street Rag. And she looked at my mother and said, I can't do anything with this guy.
Because you were too good, or because she was against jazz?
I'll never know the answer to that. I don't think I was too good, but because I had just figured out, you know, just how to play that thing. I just, like I said, I always really wanted to play. Later on, I took theory courses and stuff when I was in college, but I thought I'd better get serious about this, you know.
Well, back up here a little bit. Were you in the band in high school?
We didn't have a band in high school.
Oh
We didn't
my.
have a music program in parochial school. We didn't have a band. There was a chorus. I went to an all-male St. Patrick High School in Chicago. All-male student body, and they had a chorus. And they had a piano player that accompanied them, and that was the extent of the music program. And I wasn't really that interested in, that kind of singing or that kind of performing. So there was nothing else to do there.
So what influenced you to get into jazz?
Well, like I say, that's all I was hearing there for a while, when I was growing up. When I was growing up, and I thought, wow, this is, you know how stuff just, some things just move you, they get in there and you're going like, I want to do that. I want to know how that's done, and especially on the piano, listening to those piano players, I'm going, how are they doing that? Because I sit down and I can pick around a melody, but what's all of this stuff,
And so when did you finally get to find out about that stuff? Were you taking lessons in college, or?
I wasn't taking piano lessons. I took theory courses, and I never finished college. All kinds of things. Vietnam was going crazy back then. We're not going to talk about that, but it was just a crazy time, and I just decided to drop out for a while, and I was kind of disappointed with college on a lot of levels because it was like the same goofballs I just was in high school with, and now here we all are in college, And I was like, I don't know what I was expecting. I did get a lot of benefit out of the courses I took, but I just didn't like the environment, and it was just crazy days in those days. But my dad, when he was a teenager in Chicago, and maybe this is kind of getting off the thing.
I have no path. These are conversations I have with friends, and I'm not worried about that title trad. I only call this trad jazz today because it's no longer politically correct to say Dixieland. And I don't care about that either. I'm really just wanting to talk, musicians just to talk. It's sort of like not only reminiscing for us, but to give young up and coming people an idea of the friendships that can happen over the years.
Sure, absolutely. Anyway, my dad, when he was in his teens, 17, 18, had a job in a gas station in Chicago, and this one winter, he was working late. It was after school, and he worked a late shift. And he looked out, and there was it looked like a guy laying in the snow out there in an overcoat and a hat. So we went out and got this guy in and gave him some coffee, and it turned out to be a man who was named Art Gronwall, who was a pretty well-known guy in Chicago and amongst musicians and stuff. He was a player and an arranger. He had arranged music for the Boswell sisters and on and on and on in the early days in the 20s and 30s. And it seemed like everybody knew this guy, and my dad was kind of shared his interest in the kind of music. And Art said, "Listen, let's get together and I'll take you around." So he was taking my dad around to some of these after hours places, even, and in Chicago, and actually got to sit and hear a lot of the real people playing the real stuff, And one day, Art had a drinking problem, as kind of sounds like. And so my dad kind of lost track of him over the years. But one day I was in my teens, and my dad called him up and said, "You want to get together?" And he said, "Well, sure." And so he came over to the house, and I was introduced to him. My dad says, "My son plays a little piano." I played for him, and he says, "Oh man," he says, "You're on the right track here, but look at your hand. You're big enough to reach a 10th on the piano, which is an octave is, for instance, C to C. This is C to E, and then you fill in a 5th and a 7th and stuff in the middle." And I went, that's how those guys are getting those big mitts full of chords, They're stretching and they're just grabbing, And then I went to work on that, man, and that changed my whole outlook on piano playing,
It's a little light goes off,
It does, and I'm still working on it. Still the A flat to C is a little rough for me to catch, some of those. But
I just barely have.
A lot of those guys, a lot of people roll them, so fast that you think they're hitting the 10th.
Yeah, I my hands are so small. I barely have an octave. I hate you already. Oh no. Actually, I was talking to Les Deutsch. You know Les,
I know Les.
and he was
God,
talking about the fact. He was talking about the same fact that he has smaller hands, and so he has to roll. In
Sure.
fact, he said when he plays stride, he actually plays sixth, and people think he's doing octaves.
Yeah. There was a friend of mine, Rod Miller, who played for years at Disneyland.
Ragtime Rod.
Yeah, he would do that. He would play sixths, and of course do them so quickly you thought he was grabbing more notes than he actually was. But yeah, a lot of tricks. Fats Waller rolled tenths. He didn't have a huge hand, as some people may think. Oscar Peterson, another one of my favorite guys along the way, I came to appreciate, could have reached a 14th.
Oh my!
I mean, he had Frankenstein at the keys.
I tell my friends and my students that anytime I think I'm getting good at anything, I put on the Oscar Peterson Clark Terry album, and it slaps me right back into reality.
Oh yeah.
Woof.
Absolutely, yeah. Is that the one that has mumbles on it? I love that. Yeah. Well, I had a guy gave me a set of 3 LPs, one of those Jazz at the Philharmonic series that was made in the early 50s. And it had, it would have those, I don't know if you remember those things, Norman Granz would put together these all-star, and everybody's blowing the roof off the place and stuff. And then the second half, they introduced the Oscar Peterson Trio. And Oscar, I think, was like 18 or 20 years old at the time. And he comes out, Barney Kessel on guitar, Ray Brown on bass.
Hacks, all of them.
And they launch into this Sweet Georgia Brown that I still can't fathom to this day, And after all of that big band blowing and stuff, and you figure, what are they going to follow this with? The house absolutely comes down after these guys finish. It was really something. Yeah.
It's amazing stuff. It's humbling to listen to, which is what my point was, of course. But
yeah.
It's funny. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, as I was reading your biography, another thing I see a lot in people. I do my research on you guys. I want to make sure that I'm prepared for these interviews and that I'm not stepping on things.
I'll share something with you real quick. Either you or your son had sent me a Word file of some of the questions you were going to ask.
Right.
And I've got a Word 97 which doesn't open docx files, so I had no idea. I had no idea what those were going to be. So, folks, we're really winging this here.
I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
Because actually, originally Flip Oakes was the guy who asked for the list.
Oh, okay.
He wanted to know what questions I was going to ask.
I love Flip.
And yeah, I know he's a great guy. But my intent on that list wasn't to necessarily send them out to everybody, but we kept getting more and more people saying, "Well, what's he going to talk about? What's he going to ask?" And so So Aaron, I'll just send them out to everybody, matter of course. And I'm glad he sent it to you on Word doc that you can't open.
No.
Because it's sort of, actually, I don't stay very close to it. I'll get to the questions within a conversation, but.
Sure. No, this is very comfortable, by the way, and whatever.
Well, I didn't think it would be.
And I told you it's cocktail hour here, so cheers.
Woohoo! I didn't have any misgivings about you giving me a comfortable interview. We've always had so much fun just hanging out and talking. And also, I was seeing that you, like a lot of us, have Shakey's to thank. Pizza parlor.
Oh yeah, I eventually ran into Sherwood Johnson, Shakey, years later in Sacramento. But I told him, I said, "Man, you saved my life." I'd been drafted 2 months. I went in 2 months after my wife and I got married in 1968 because everybody was going married to college. It didn't make any difference. Everybody's getting pulled in there. And I ended up with the military police in Augusta, Georgia, of all the things.
I can't see you as an MP. I hate to say this, but.
Well, a lot of it is directing traffic and, they teach you how to break up bar fights and stuff. And I said, well, this isn't bad. Then I find out that the military police were the first guys sent into these little towns in Vietnam to make sure it was safe for the infantry to come in. And I'm going, oh. But I never got sent over there. I got assigned to the school because I was a marksman with a .45 pistol, and they kept me there. And during that time, we moved down, rented an apartment, moved down from Chicago, and I started moonlighting in a Shakey's Pizza Parlor in Augusta, Georgia. And these guys from Special Services Entertainment Division came in one night, and they could see by I used to have hair then, my military haircut that I was.
It's still a pretty military haircut, I got to tell you. Really.
Well, it's kind of not the same color it was. But anyway, they said, "You're in the military." I said, "Yeah, guilty." And they said, "You should come and audition for us. We've got a entertainment unit of Special Services, and we like your piano playing and blah blah blah." So I went and I auditioned on piano, and the guy says, the major there that was in charge of this little thing, and these guys were doing troop shows and things are all around the base. It was a kind of a all around kind of a group. It wasn't the Army band or anything like that. And so they said, "Well, we got 3 piano players in the group, and 2 of them are arrangers." And I said, "Well, what do you need?" I said, "Well, I also play drums," which I did, and I sat in on drums and I played. And the guy says, "Well, we got a drummer. That's all he does." So we're kind of set there. And I said, "Well, what are you looking for?" And they said, "Our tenor saxophone player is shipping out like in a month." And I said, "Give me that thing." And I had never played a tenor before. I had a little alto that I bought from a guy in Chicago for, I don't know, $20. And I would just honk around on, taught myself some fingers, play with some of these records like I was doing with the drums and piano. And I played 2 choruses of Rose Room in the key of G on the tenor. I don't know how I ended up with that. And they bought it.
Oh my. Well, you must have been convincing.
Your life is passing before your eyes. It's amazing what you can rise to. Yeah. So I became the tenor saxophone player, and this was like an 8-piece group, and we're doing like Blood, Sweat, and Tears kind of material in Chicago. So it was like inside parts, and I would learn them by rote, on the thing. So it's doo-doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo-doo, that kind of stuff. And I got away with that for a couple months, and then the drummer finally passed out, and I got moved on, and I became the drummer then.
Wow!
So when
I didn't know that.
When I met Shakey's, when I met Sherwood Johnson, I told him that story. I said, you say an abridged version of that, and I said, I could have gone rat-a-tat-tat someplace and maybe not have come back. And he said, "Ray, you can't believe the amount of stories like that I've heard over the years. How Shakey's changed my life somehow, and he was very pleased to hear stuff like that, Interesting."
That's great. I was going to ask you what got you to California, but I know, and the interesting thing is Flip had almost the identical story about shoveling snow off of his car, or his parents shoveling snow off of his car, because he was back east also, and his story is kind of funny. I mean, yours, that you just said, okay, there's no reason that I should be doing this, and moved to L.A. But his mom said to his dad, he says, "I want to move out to L.A." And his dad said, "Well, if you sell the house, and then we'll move." And his dad was a long distance trucker, and he came back from that trip, and his mom had sold the house.
Wow.
So we just brought him to L.A. Snow again.
I had, and I was doing all kinds of stuff back in the Midwest before the snowstorm of '79 that changed, when I decided I can't do this the rest of my life. I had become a member of the Screen Actors Guild because I was had been doing like small market commercials and things, and I had did a little bit of small market radio, and but I was also playing with guys like Bob Schultz, who was with a group out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin called the Riverboat Ramblers. It was pretty well established, and it was a pretty working band, and I was their drummer for the last 2 years that I was there, and worked with a lot of other guys around town, some of these Salty Dog guys, and all that kind of stuff. So I had kind of like a background in besides the Chicago repertoire, the West Coast stuff, because that's what all those guys were playing. And I thought, well, let's see what happens here. But that snow I'm shoveling off the roof, I can't do this, And I had a friend it was February of '79. I had a friend in New York and a friend in Los Angeles. And I asked my wife, I said, "What do you think? I don't know. We got to do something." Oh, and I was working for a small publishing company as a photographer and a tape editor. They had lessons on tape, and I was doing product photography. So the two of my kind of hobby things that I was interested in, and got into actually doing it for a living there for a while. And they were folding, and this company was just too small. So we lost our health insurance. We had our son born right then, and it was a financial problem. And I said, I got to do something. You know, it ain't going to be here, I don't think. Should I go to New York? And this is February. I said, should I go to New York or LA? And she looks at me and says, what do you think? You know, okay, of course, LA, you know, in February. So I drove out there, and that's how I started getting into trouble out there on the West Coast. Yeah.
I was always wondering if you did some radio, because you have a fabulous voice.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I did a lot of that, and I actually worked on that because the Midwesterners have kind of like a nasal A, you know, I can't stand it, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
There's a few little quirky things.
Yeah, don't you know if you're from Minnesota?
Oh, Minnesota. Yeah, sure. You betcha.
Oh, yeah. The girl I married's name's Bergstrom, so that should give you a clue.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you know? Yeah. But that kind of worked to my advantage too when I got out there, because that's a sound. It's kind of innocuous, and that's something that you know, people are looking for when they're hiring voices. They don't want it to sound. They want it to sound like.
It's what's considered the quintessential American accent. You know?
I think so. Yeah. And I was very lucky. I did a ton of things out there over the years. Industrial things, stuff the public won't hear, but sales training videos and, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. And that became a pretty good source of my income out there.
And well, for one of my favorite jazz musicians, you've got an extensive filmography. I was, of course, between all the Matlock stuff and some of the other things you've done, you've had a lot of face time on the media.
Well, I was very fortunate, and most of that was done. That's why I went out there. I didn't know anything about Disneyland. You know, I thought, okay, I'm going to go out. I'm going to try and be an actor. That's what I've been doing, an actor and a voiceover guy. And a couple of the musicians that I worked with, Wayne Jones, who we recently lost, and Mike Walbridge is still alive. A couple of the Salty Dogs in Chicago. They said, look up, get out and check out Disneyland, because they use, you know, live music is what makes that place tick, and you might get on a sub list and have something to fall back on. I always say they must have seen my acting, you know. But it took me a while, and I called up there, and they said, you know, well, we send a picture and a resume, which of course I had. And it was a while before I was hearing from them. But they also gave me the name of a guy named Bob Raggio.
Sure.
To look up.
God of Washboard, yes.
Washboard player with South Frisco Band.
By the way, I just interviewed recently Dan Comans.
Oh, excellent.
So.
I've got some, yeah, we know stuff about each other, but we're not going to talk about it on this. Wonderful guy, Danny Comans. Yeah. Anyway, so I get out there and I call Bob Raggio, and he had a little bit of a drinking problem too, and he was just on his way to be treated for that someplace. He was leaving and he said, "Oh, Ray, Jonesy, Walbridge," and you know, and he said, we can't meet right now, but call this guy Bob Ringwald," and he gave me his name. And I said, "Well, okay, I want to find some music out here, you know." And I called Bob, and Bob was playing Shakey's Pizza Parlor in Burbank. And I called him. He says, "You free Saturday night?" I says, "I'm free every night. I'm not doing anything. I'm looking for work, you know." So he says, "Come on down." And I came down, and I'd never met Bob, didn't know anything about him. And I walked into this place, and he's up at the piano, and he's playing and singing and hitting the button and changing the slides, and everybody's, you know, the typical old Shakey's that used to be. And the place is roaring, and I'm going like, this is cool, you know. And so he said, "I'm going to take a break," and he closed the piano, and there was a little key that locked the thing, and he did that. And I was walking on my way up there to introduce myself, and he put that white and yellow cane together. You know, I had no idea he was blind. And so he gets off the stage, and he's tapping, and he walks right past me over to the bar, and the guy's got a beer there waiting for him. I'm going, this is haunted or something, you know what? And it took me a while before I could go introduce myself. And I said, "Hi, we spoke on the phone." He said, "Here," he pulled that little key out on his keychain. He said, "Go unlock the piano. Let's play something." So I went up, and I didn't use the slides or anything, but I played and sang a couple of tunes. And locked the thing back up. And by the time I got back, he had talked the manager into hiring me 3 days a week. So I owe Bobby Ringwald my first work in California.
He also has just agreed to come on to the interview show. So
I think you mentioned that. Yeah.
yeah.
I haven't seen him in years. I miss him a lot. And we had so much fun together. And I was looking forward to, we almost did a cruise together that got canceled this last June. But I was looking forward to actually working with him because I was in his Great Pacific Band for 8 years.
Well, that's where I met you, actually.
Yeah. But I mean, since then, he moved back up to, I think he lives in Placerville or someplace outside of Sacramento. And I haven't seen him in years and years. But I was looking forward to that cruise because I was going to pull my keychain out and say, what is it? What's this? Do you remember this? And I still have that little key from Shakey's that opened the piano in Burbank.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And
he's phenomenal.
He's absolutely phenomenal. And I actually accused him a couple of times of being able to like see out of one eye, and he's just jacking the rest of us around. Here's a real quick story, Ringwald story. We had a gig in Northridge. I would drive up from Disneyland, bust my butt up there on a Sunday to make like a 6:30 downbeat or something up at this place in Northridge. My brother's place, I think it was called. And so the band at that time, Zeke Zarchi, Don Nelson on the soprano sax, Bob Havens, Dick Carey on piano.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Jack Wadsworth on bass saxophone. Jack was like the senior music editor up at Disney Studios. And myself on drums. And Bob never played piano in that band. He played banjo all the time. And so we had that gig up there, and he says, it was kind of during the winter. I think it was right after Christmas. And he says, can you give me a lift home? I said, sure. And so after the gig, I fold up my drums and everything. We get over and go to Bob's house, and he had a little white house at the end of the street. There was no street light. It was a little white picket fence, one of those kind of things, wooden house. And he gets out of the car right away and goes and opens the fence, and he's walking up, and I'm behind him, but I'm doing what he's doing, and it's dark. And he got a key out, he opens the door, and he turns around and he says, be quiet because everybody's sleeping. I want to show you what they got me for Christmas. And I said, okay. And so he's going along, I hear his footsteps, but I got my hand on the wall because it's pitch black in there. And then I hear him like turn into a doorway. So I get there and I stop because I don't know what's going on, what else. And I hear footsteps, a drawer open. I hear like a package, paper, wrapping paper. And then all of a sudden I hear his voice say, what do you think of this? And I called him some kind of name and said, there's no lights on it. And he goes, oh, and he walked right past me and flipped the light switch.
That's wonderful.
And I always accused him of, wait a minute.
When I met Bob, I was actually running the first federal jazz band.
I remember that.
A band you can trust. And I didn't have a piano player, and I didn't know Bob, and I didn't know who he was. And that band was Bill Dendel and Jim Mayhack and Rusty Stiers.
Yeah.
And I was fronting the band on my tuba, and Bill and Mayhack came up and he said, "Hey Dan, we've got a piano player who wants to sit in with us."
Sure.
And I go, well, sure, who? And I look down and I see this guy standing here with a cane. And I'm thinking to myself, what? And they said, oh yeah, it'll be fine. Come on. And so that's how I met Bob. And of course, he ripped through the set.
Yeah.
But what a great guy.
Absolute sweetheart of a guy, and I miss him terribly. And of course, he got me my first work, and then I was thrilled to play drums with him. I played piano the first time with that band. The Great Pacific Band only had 5 guys. And it was Zeke Zarchi and Don Nelson, a guy named Roy Brewer, their original trombone player, Bob, and they asked me to play piano on this thing. Who else? Oh, Jack Wadsworth on bass sax.
Yeah.
But they were playing one of those jazz clubs like in Santa Monica or something, one of those Sunday meetings, and a lot of people want to dance, and they said, you need bigger than what you got. So he called me, he says, you want to play piano with us? I said, sure, I'd love to. after the first set, on the break, I said to those guys, I said, I really would like to play drums with you guys. And like they had it rehearsed, I said, we hate drummers, And I eventually talked them into letting me come to a rehearsal. They used to rehearse on Mondays at Disney Studios because two of the guys, Jack and Roy Brewer, were they were employees up there. And so they said, okay, and I brought a snare drum and I brought a cymbal and my stick bag, which has in it a little pair of Ludwig Drum Company made them. They're called Bach cymbals.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. They're like handheld hi-hats.
Kind of, but they don't have a hi-hat cymbal sound. They've got that's what Zudi Singleton is playing on all those.
They sound like teacups on the recordings.
I could never picture what they were, or coconuts or something. Yeah, and I found those. That's another story.
Zudi Singleton's my favorite drummer, by the way.
Oh man, well you're on the right track there. Anyway, so they said we're working on Sugarfoot Strut. And there's a little intro, and then it's got a drum break. And I said, oh, no, I know it. And they went, ba, 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 and I went, Zudi's lick on those cymbals. And Bob cuts the band off. And he says, and we had already played a couple of tunes, and they were kind of happy with what I was. They thought I was going to come in there and build a house, on drums. And I was playing like you should, And Bob says, wait a minute, that's the sound that's on the record. What is that? And I said, it's Bach cymbals. That's what Zudi's playing. And he says, let me feel that. And I wouldn't let him touch it. I said, I'll let you touch these if I can be the drummer. And they all kind of nodded, and and they said, yeah. so I let him feel the cymbals.
Blackmail.
Well, yeah, but I gotta love that band, and they were into so much of the really good stuff. They're doing takedowns of things, and later when Jimmy Turner got in there and started doing some of the arrangement, he ended up with Jim Cullum for years. We lost him, and we got replaced by Dick Harry of all people. Yeah, just a wonderful bunch of people to work with. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that's something I found. I was actually kind of a latecomer into the style. I didn't get into it until Dan Barrett and those guys kidnapped me at Orange Coast College. So I went through all of my high school years, and pre that I was playing Latin bands and big bands, and I was a trumpet player for the most part.
Oh my, yeah.
Actually, and so yeah, I mean that's one thing I noticed is I don't have to play till 2 a.m. anymore on Latin gigs, and it hurt a lot less than trying to play like Maynard. And
yeah.
And the people were just incredibly nice around this type of music.
Sure. Yeah, it's understandable. I think is a main thing. It's very danceable. It was dance music. Who was it? Jelly Roll or somebody said, if they're not dancing, you're playing too fast. That kind of thing. But I came up in Chicago, and I don't remember playing Latin gigs, but on drums, I played. And mostly what I was gigging on was on drums. Piano was just for my own amusement, early on. But God, of course, polka bands, you're playing at weddings and rock bands and country bands and stuff. And so I came up with all of that.
Yeah, anything to put money in your pocket. That's one thing John Brandon and I were talking about earlier. That he's that way also, of course.
Oh yeah, he's a wonderful player. He was in my original Chicagoans band. I formed this band in the '80s, late '80s, to do festivals, but we were all professional players, and it got to be where I can't keep the band together because guys are gigging. Roger Newman, our late friend, on Reeds, and Artie Dragon and Brian Atkinson's. No offense, Brian Shaw, who's
it was the Disney crowd basically.
Yeah, and except for Roger and Mike Pedersen on guitar, and yeah, but it was really a good band, and I thought entertaining and everything, but because everybody was a pro, it was hard to. I always felt if you saw us, in this end of the country, and you saw us at another festival, you should see the same people,
right?
And that was getting harder and harder to do, and it just kind of came and went,
Well, that's kind of what happened with the First Federal. That band started because all of us were at a festival with other bands, and those guys started talking about how they miss being a sideman.
Yeah.
And like a fool, I said, okay, I'll put a band together. You guys can be the sidemen.
Sure.
And I thought it sounded like a good idea until
It
I
looks good
realized
on-
that
looks good on paper.
they just turned into sidemen. Yes.
Yeah.
And did all the things they were complaining about. So
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. Oh well, it was fun while it lasted.
So tell me about your time at Disney.
So I finally ended up getting called, and they saw my headshot and my resume, and they said, "This looks interesting." And they said, "We're not really looking for anybody, but right now, but we'd like to hear you play." You know, they're always very cautious about about how they handle that stuff. And it was in the winter. It was still, I think it was still February or early March of '79, and they used to be closed 2 days in the winter, and which is unheard of.
And they were
now.
closed, what, Mondays and Tuesdays, right?
Mondays and Tuesdays, and this was a Monday, and that's when all of the guys were out in the street with the freezing the gum off the sidewalks and repainting, and because you never saw any work being done there. You know, they did it all on Mondays and Tuesdays. So I went in and I met this guy Mike Davis, who was Sonny Anderson's. Sonny Anderson, of course, was the guy who booked all of the talent. I think he's in the Guinness Book of World Records or something like that. But I met those guys, and they were over on the space stage, auditioning a couple of groups. One of the groups was it was Dick Hardwick and Doug Maddox put it together, and it was like I think it was like a country, like a bluegrass.
Oh yeah, Thunder Mountain Boys.
Well, this was before they even got hired. You know, we were all auditioning over this. This is '79. I think that's what it kind of morphed into, and eventually the story. Sonny told him, I come up with something that's got a washboard in it, and maybe we'll hire you for Main Street. And that's when Dick went on Washboard, and they became the Main Street Maniacs.
Oh my!
And they started. They came in like 6 months after I got hired, but I'm wading through all this. I'm going, wow, these people are really. This is some good people here, you know. And I'd never been to Disneyland before. Growing up in Chicago, we saw the place being built, you know, on the TV show and everything, and Mickey Mouse Club and all that kind of stuff. But we didn't take those kind of vacations. We maybe drove out to a lake, you know, or something like that. But I never took long road trips so I'd never been there, and I didn't know what they were looking for. And we walked out on Main Street, and I'm looking like, oh, who designed this? You know, if you really look at it, there were some people like under the influence that came up with the way that. But anyway, they took a bag off the piano at Coke Corner. They call it refreshment corner, but it's not appropriately to call it Coke Corner, I guess, anymore. And Sonny says, play something. And I didn't know what they were looking for. I'd never been there. So I just came up with something, and I started playing. And I think it was My Gal Sal. And I did a chorus or two, and he comes over and flips the cover of the piano. I had to pull my hands out, just the keyboard cover. And I thought, well, all right, I guess that's the end of this. And he leans over to me and he says, when can you start?
Now you didn't write You'll Never Find a Lunch in Jerry Rothschild's Lunch Pail, did you?
No. I know Jerry. I remember Jerry Rothschild. He was kind of a character.
He just passed last year, but
oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's okay. But somebody of that ilk, I don't know, it was Ragtime Rod or somebody, but the rumor is that song came out of that corner. So,
well, there was a lot of people that played through. Judy Carmichael was there working at the time, and she was about to leave for New York in about less than a year, I think. And this guy named Johnny, well, it's Hodges right now, but it was Lee when I met him, and then it became Norman. He had kind of a confusing childhood or something, but there was only a few people there, and then Rod had some of his friends that had subbed. But there was so I became the third wheel there for about a year, and then ended up going off onto other things. There was a show coming up at Plaza Gardens for the 80th, 1980 for the 25th anniversary of Disneyland.
Right.
And I played that summer at Coke Horn and was out again. And they had called me, Mike Davis called me and said, we got this character show. It's got these two guys, and one of them ended up to be Sonny Helmer, who is another volume unto himself, and a drummer named Richie Watson. And there was a piano player who was out on a cruise. Can you come in and play these, the rehearsals? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to. I wasn't doing anything. The acting thing really wasn't getting off the ground. I had done, I don't know, I'd done something. Oh, I did a thing. Andy Griffith had a very short series called Salvage One.
Okay.
That was that year. And I did one episode of that. I did a scene with Richard Jekyll, who was a regular on the show. And Andy owned this junkyard, and it had something to do with these people convincing him to build his spaceship and go up and salvage satellites for their gold or something. You know, it was pretty frustrating. Sure. But I had met him on that thing. We're on the back lot up at the Columbia, and I was walking by, and Andy, who was a pretty good guitar player and singer, was sitting under a tree and was entertaining some people singing a tune called "I'm Satisfied with My Gal." So he gets to the bridge, and I was just walking by with a cup of coffee because there's a lot of time to kill, you know, as you probably know on these sets of everything. It takes forever. And he got caught on the bridge, and I said, she got great big eyes and pretty teeth, and how I love her dimpled chin. He said, come over here. How do you know that song? And of course I learned it from a guy when I was in the military in that entertainment unit who's actually from Minnesota, and it was a brother-in-law of Frankie Yankovic, the polka guy.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah.
Weird Al's dad.
This guy played accordion, and you know, and I learned that it was one of the tunes he did, so I knew that from the Army. And so Andy said, you know, and I said, I don't know what, he asked me over to the house once, and he was like drinking then and in the middle of his divorce. And so I went over there, and we had some fun playing piano and everything. And I had just recorded, I had a cassette of a recording I had made for the little label out in Ventura called Euphonic Sounds. All they recorded was piano. I don't remember how I got involved with them. But I gave him the copy of this, and I'm playing and singing songs on there, and that was it. So I forgot where I'm going with this. 8 years later, Andy calls up at the house, and he says, you know, I got this Matlock show, and I want to get out of the courtroom and in my office. They got me stuck. I want to get out, and I said, what if I have a friend that owns a bar? And it was set in Atlanta, and they said, oh, like a country western bar. He says, no, he says, like this. And he says, I gave him your tape. And he said, they like it. And he said, they want to meet you. I can't guarantee anything, but, you know. And I thought, okay. You know, so that's how that started. And
you ended up getting Doug on that gig too, right?
I get what?
Doug Maddox on a lot of those episodes, maybe.
I don't know.
No?
No, he didn't do any of those with me. I only did like a dozen of them.
I remember.
It never had anything to do with the plot. it was always, you know, if the story was running short, then where's Ben? Oh, he's down at Templin's, you know.
I know one year he ended up at the LAX festival. I actually got to meet him, I think through you. One year he came to LAX.
Andy?
The Sweet and Hot, yeah.
What a marvelous guy. When I first met him, I thought he was doing an impression of himself because he was exactly the way he was Mayberry. He would call up, you know, he'd call up at the house. Ray, it's Andy. I said, hey, Andy, what's up? I'm not interrupting anything, am I? I said, no, you know, you're not having dinner or anything, are you? No? Well, I can call back later. And I said, no, what's going on? Well, you know, I said, what is it? You know? He
was a Southern Jimmy Stewart, yeah.
And a lot of times he would he would be playing a tune, and I'm going to the bridge, and I got a B flat 7. Where does it go from here? And I said, try an E flat. Try an E flat minor or something, whatever. And he said, hold on. He put down the phone. He's like in his kitchen or something. And he goes and strums. I hear him strumming. He goes, hot damn. And then he comes back. That's all. Thanks. Sorry I bothered you.
That's terrific.
Totally real person. Yeah. But how did we get to Andy? It was
it started out. I think I asked you about your time at Disneyland, but
Disneyland, yeah. So then, so that happened in there someplace. They hired me for Co-Corner. Then I did that show with for the 25th anniversary with Sonny Helmer and Richie Watson, a little trio, and characters. And the Frank Oz, one of the Muppet guys, had made a thumper rabbit that came out of the piano. There was a rabbit hutch built on the piano. And they were writing, they saw I could do lines and stuff. So they were writing comedy for me and the rabbit, And the guy, John Luton was his name, was the writer. Disney's first show writer. They always just had show directors that were choreographers and, okay, you say this and go here and do that. But he actually wrote that show. And then through that experience, they did the following year, he and Larry Billman, who was the director of entertainment there at the time, put a show, a nighttime show in the Golden Horseshoe called the Pecos Bill Wild West Review. And John came to me, or they both came to me, and they said, because they knew I was basically an actor, and they said, we got 3 people in the pit. We want you to play the show on piano, but it's a 70-year-old prospector, a cavalry officer, and an Indian chief. Which one you want to be? I says, a prospector, because I'm looking, okay, I can get my teeth into this, 70-year-old prospector. Jinkers. Yeah. So they wrote this thing, and I ended up doing the pre-show and leading the band, and we did that for like 1,000 performances at night and during the private parties at the Golden Horseshoe. Isn't that something?
So much great talent came out of. I mean, Banu is another one of the people that came out of that.
I had just missed those guys. They were working with Helmer again. The class of 27, he had brought them from Miami, I think, Banu, and I don't know who else came. Westy Westenhofer was part of. They picked him up along the way, and he was in that class of 27 show. John Reynolds. That was before my time there. In fact, my first day playing at Co-Corner on Main Street, there's a guy sitting there who turned out to be John Reynolds. And he's kind of just smiling. He's listening to me playing. He's smiling. I says, he was applauding. And I said, you really enjoying this? And he said, yeah. And he said, I said, oh, are you a player? And he says, yeah. He says, this is my last day. I've been doing a show here and I'm clearing out my locker. And he says, and it's too bad because he says, I really would like to work with you now that I see this, And I said, well, it's my first day here and I'm really excited and, I've never been here before. And he said, you should have been here 10 years ago. This is nothing like it was 10 years ago. And, I found myself after 26 years saying the same thing to people just before I left.
Sure.
So I don't know if the place since opening day has been going downhill or it's just everybody's perception of it. But yeah, amazing talents over there.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Gosh, I came up with something brilliant I was going to ask, and I know what it was. I want to thank you for somebody who's persistently tried to get me a job there to sub, and you could get as far as getting me to costume, and then all of a sudden a red flag would pop up on my name in the park. And I finally found out why after, I think you've tried to hire me like 3 times when you were at the park for one thing or another to sub with something. And it was because, you remember Dave Wright, tuba player?
Oh yeah, sure.
Evidently he did something to piss somebody off.
Oh,
when they went back to the office to enter a no hire sign on it, they said, what's the name of that heavy set, darker skinned tuba player? And somebody from that was in the earshot said, oh, Dan Zeilinger. And I got red flagged. And I I got called by several people. I got called by Owen to do the fanfare unit and
Sure.
a few things.
Owen Kirshner, another.
And my red flag would come up on me every time saying, "Don't hire that guy."
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Well, I was too until I found out what was happening. At least I knew that, it wasn't something I did.
Dave just passed away recently. I did a show with him. Now check this out. John Luden, the guy who wrote the Rabbit Show, who hired me for the Pecosville Wild West Review, went with Larry Billman and opened Tokyo Disneyland, and then came back and found he didn't have a job. Ended up writing cartoons for Hanna-Barbera, worked with Don Nelson up there,
Okay.
who was a script supervisor, went over to Universal, and he pulled me in on a couple of voiceover things up there, which is great. But then he decided Hollywood was had enough, sold his house. He and his wife moved up to Bozeman, Montana, and started the Montana Theater Works.
Okay.
A bunch of years ago, and they were scrounging around for venues. And an old theater that was built in 1919 all of a sudden came up for a sale right downtown. It's a little town, it's 2 blocks long. They had enough backers up there, and there's a lot of big money up there. Just people you can't believe that are, Ted Turner's got a bison ranch up there and has a restaurant in town. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's going on, cold cattle money. So they bought this thing, they financed this thing, and he's been running this thing since then. And I was doing a bunch of, he was bringing me up there to do some fundraising concerts for the restoration. They've restored the thing. It's to its 1919 grandeur, and they do all kinds of shows and stuff up there. What's that got to do with what we're talking about?
Dave Wright.
Dave Wright. So they said, I did a solo concert up there for the first fundraiser. And John says, would you like to work with a band? We've got some great guys in town here. And I'm going like, oh, And I said, I know some people around here. There's a good friend of mine, John Goodrich from the
excellent
Uptown Lowdown Band.
Right.
Lives in Whitefish, Montana. And I said, I can call him, and I know he knows some guys. So we put a little band together. Dave Wright was wives or something like that, was living up in Whitefish. He was actually, shortly after that, he was in pretty bad shape, sold all his horns, he stopped playing, and I think he's passed us now, passed on. But he was on that thing, John Goodrich, trombone player from Helena, I can't think of his name, with that other band.
I know, I'm the same way.
Oh boy, yeah, Black Swan.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, we got together, we did that concert up there. That was the last time I saw Dave, and that's many years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what happened. That's how come you could never hire me.
That's terrible. I feel bad about that, Dan.
Well, it's not your fault.
Well, no, and I just feel bad that happened. That's you get pegged like that, and oh no, not him.
No, that stuff happens, and you just go on. I ended up at
it's
8 years in Knott's Berry Farm with Brad and Rusty, so I can't complain too much.
No, not at all. Brad and Rusty. The last time I saw Brad was a year ago up in Sacramento. I played with Peter Mayers. Had the reunion not the reunion, but the new Sierra 7.
Right.
And I played. That was the I'm the founding piano player of that.
Are you?
Yeah. They didn't have any gigs, and Peter asked me to play piano up at that thing, and I said okay. And I haven't played with him since, but I'm the founding piano player. Of course, he was Randy Morris all the time, but
yeah.
Not too shabby either. And here's something interesting about Disney, as if there isn't enough interesting about Disney. Right around 1990, I started getting the itch. This isn't what I came out here to do, and we get kids, and the benefit package is great and everything, but I really, I don't know where I'm going as an actor and a voice guy here. And I really needed, and I had an agent in town that was really pushing me. I could get you out on more of these things if you were available. And I only used to go out sporadically. And I got an amazing amount, of hiring from auditions, considering the few times I basically went out compared to other actors in town. Anyway, I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. So I told Disney, I think it was 1990, so 90-ish, something, I've been here a long time. This is wasn't it came out. I need to stretch in other directions, blah, 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 blah. And so they said, fine. And so, so I left. And Randy Morris was in town. He had just come off a gig with Fred Finn up in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And Stan Freese, who knew Randy Randy played trumpet in the original opening day band at Orlando at Disney World.
Okay.
And of course ended up banjo and everything else at Rosie O'Grady's, and all those guys, Bill Allred. Anyway, Randy called up and says, "You got anything going on at Disney?" And I just lost a thing in Las Vegas. And Stan says, "Yeah, Templin just left." And he thought, not only can you be the piano player, but you can jump in on banjo and trumpet and everything else. And Randy came down. Actually, he came down, was scoping it out like my last week there, and that's where we got to know each other. And so I left, and Randy ended up not taking the job. He had an offer for something else. I forget what it was. It was like some television thing in Nashville or something, which was going to be a little sweeter for him or something. So he didn't take the job. So Disney, they didn't fire me. They just de-statused me or something. Maybe thinking he'll be back,
Sure.
Well, they were right. And so they started calling me to sub like a day or a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. Next thing you know, I'm working 5-6 days a week back there again. And just in time for the benefit package to kick back in, just in time for our daughter to, no, my wife had, our daughter was born in 1980. No, just in time, my wife had a case of colon cancer. And those benefits kicked back in just in the nick of time to take care of her. And so she's been clear since then, since 90 something or other. But isn't that weird how things work,
Somebody's looking after you.
And I've done cruises with Randy and stuff and other things with him since, and we talk about it, we go, man, you can't make this stuff up, it's just stuff happens, and stuff's meant to be or not meant to be, and it's been a crazy life. Yeah. Wait. I have the rest of my martini. Hey. Oh no, that's doo or one of those.
Well, listen, Ray, this has been fun, man. I'm gonna sort of ease off here.
Okay.
But however, I want to give you a chance to have a last thought or a final joke, or plug anything you may have available online for people to purchase.
No, I closed my website, and I really wasn't selling anything off of that. And I was just looking today. I've been fortunate enough to play on 44 CDs in my career, including things with John Jorgensen and some real things, And we just did a recording with Howard Alden and brilliant guy Tyler Jackson from Texas, and Rob Wright, who was one of my newfound friends here when I moved here, the spectacular banjo and guitar player, and those guys. So anyway, I just want to say, for a guy whose parents didn't understand what he was doing, they said, "Well, you ever going to get a real job?" I always felt that I didn't want to be this age. I'm 73 right now, and probably a half. And I didn't want to be this age and have a thought like, boy, I wonder what would have happened if. Well,
Sure.
I went for it, and I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel so lucky to have met so many and worked with so many wonderful people, yourself included.
Well, thank
Not
you.
just because you have the podcast, but always, and learned so much and been influenced by so many talented people and done so many wonderful things. I recreated a lot of the original voices when they rebuilt Fantasyland at Disneyland in 1983, and they're still running. I've the most heard character voice there still in the dark rides, and
Aha.
it's amazing. And all of the other things, I didn't say anything like that at Disneyland because I didn't want them to know I was, involved at the studio.
Give us a little sample of one of the dark ride announcements.
Oh, I'm all of the bad guys in like Pinocchio. I'm the Cockney coachman. You blokes going somewheres.
That's the one.
Yeah. Anyway, but I've had such an opportunity to do so many cool things and meet so many and work with so many talented people. I'm amazed.
Well, I know, I've been, in fact, I just, earlier I interviewed Howard Alden.
Yeah.
And everybody, I hope you understand how loved you are, Ray. The community thinks highly of your playing and you as a person. And I'm right in there with the rest of them.
Oh man, well, thank you so much. I mean, that's what more can you ask for out of a life and a career?
Another martini, maybe.
I'm married. Well, that's coming. I'm married to the love of my life for 52 years now, and she's my best friend and biggest supporter and biggest critic. But you need all that kind of stuff. So I've been just really fortunate, and I'm just. I don't know where the next thing is going, but we'll see.
I don't know, but I hope it involves us playing together again.
That would be marvelous. I hope so too. All right, it's a date.
All right, sir, you got it.
Whenever that is, I'm leaving the calendar open. Thank you so
Great.
much, Dan, for inviting me to do this, and thank you all for listening. And I hope you got a kick out of some of this stuff. And we'll talk soon.
You're welcome. It's a blast, man. It's a blast. Take care, Ray.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for watching Trad Jazz Today with Dan Zeilinger. Make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Videos come out every Wednesday and Friday.